Hey everyone, the immune system is so cool. It protects us against diseases caused by foreign invaders, pathogens that are typically viruses and bacteria for the most common ways that we get sick, and also protecting us against our own cells that can sort of launch an insurrection, mutiny, and stop behaving the way they're supposed to and instead start acting like cancer. So our immune system can protect us against our own cells too if they become cancerous. And the immune system is amazing and adaptable and has lots of different sort of elements to make it a very profoundly effective defense system. And things can go wrong because the immune system has the ability to kill stuff. That's what we want to happen to the foreign invaders that might make us sick. We want them dead. But because the immune system has that power, sometimes things can go wrong too. And so there are autoimmune diseases where our immune system attacks our own body, and that can cause problems too. So let's get busy and do some introduction. So some sort of different levels that the immune system exists in, and different functions. The reconnaissance function, there are cells in the immune system that are like the spies that are continuously going throughout the body looking for any foreign invaders, recognizing them as different from ourself. All of our cells carry particular sort of ID badges on their cell membranes, on their surface. And those proteins will help the immune system recognize that, okay, this is a good guy, this is one of us, as opposed to a foreign invader that wouldn't have the same marker proteins, the same identity tags on the surface of the cell. And then responding to those different types of threats in different ways. The first line of defense is just to create a barrier to prevent pathogens from getting in. And we'll talk a little bit about skin and mucous membranes. And we'll talk a lot more about the immune system's ability to recognize self versus non-self. Who are the good guys and who are the foreign invaders? This is a great picture of an immune system cell. It could be a macrophage starting to engulf a foreign invader there, taking care of business. In the slideshow, on this slide in the notes section, I included a link to our friends, the Amoeba Sisters, 8.5-minute video that introduces the immune system. And it talks a little bit about how immune cells do recognize self versus foreign pathogens. And that might be a good place for y'all to start off. And it's a pretty entertaining video. All right, so we'll talk about innate immunity and different non-specific responses and what that means. Innate immunity is something that's there all the time. It's not a response to a particular pathogen. It's not a response to a particular infection. It's the kind of defenses that are always there in our body, no matter what. Innate immunity involves different types of cells and different types of structures that are not specific to a particular pathogen. So they're defending us against anything that might invade. And the reason we make this distinction is that we have very specific responses. And this is why many of us have already gotten vaccinated against the COVID pathogen, and why all of us should, and why we get vaccinated against other things is because those elements of our immune system give us a very specific protection against a very specific pathogen. And we'll talk about how that happens naturally and how it can happen passively through vaccination. And that is the acquired or adaptive immunity. After we've been exposed to a particular pathogen very often we have protection for a long time against that specific pathogen. If it gets back into our body, very often our immune system is able to respond quickly and efficiently enough that that pathogen doesn't even make us sick the second time it might get into our body. So this is a slide that I'll not spend much time on, but it's a good sort of deep dive and overview and at the same time. And there are notes on the slide talking a little bit in particular about humoral responses. Humor is not funny response. It's not a comical response. Humors are relating to body fluids. And it's an old term. A humor is a body fluid. And that's an old term that is stuck to the modern way we describe our immune functioning. Okay, so getting to these innate, non-specific responses. And we're talking about humans. It's essentially the same in other mammals. If we go outside of mammals, we start to have some really different types of immune responses, although there are lots of similarities. And when we get outside of the animal kingdom, things get different, more different still, not surprisingly. So the barrier defenses are skin and mucous membranes. And you'll see mucus spelled with and without an O, because mucus as a noun, the slimy stuff that comes out of your nose, that kind of mucus, that is M-U-C-U-S. And when mucus is an adjective describing something, like a mucous membrane, a type of membrane that produces mucus, then it gets the O. So mucous membrane, mucus as an adjective has an O. I'm not misspelling it. Well, although I probably will misspell it sometimes, but there's a reason why it looks different. Okay, so our skin is amazing. You could take, a vial of some of the most deadly pathogens and pour it onto a person's healthy, unbroken skin, and they're not going to get sick. Skin is an amazingly effective barrier to virtually all pathogens. Mucous membranes are in places where our body has the outside necessarily interacting with the inside. So this is the places where we are exchanging stuff. It's the places where the insides of our body need to come into contact with the outsides of our body. So this is in our respiratory system, in our urinary and reproductive systems, in the mouth and the nasal passages, in parts of our digestive system. We have mucous membranes. And that's because skin is impenetrable. And so in these places where we might need to exchange stuff, we can't put skin there because we never get anything in or out of our body. So mucous membranes are sort of the next best barrier if you can't have skin. And we talked a little bit in the respiratory system about how the lining of our breathing tubes are coated with mucus. And this mucous membrane and the sticky mucus that lines it is able to trap pathogens before they can get to places where they can cause infection. This picture shows a nice cross-section of what that looks like, both in a micrograph of some tissue from our respiratory system, and then in a diagrammatic form where you can see a little more clearly what's going on. So the cells produce this sticky mucus. That mucus lines and protects the cells from the gunk that we breathe in. And then these cilia, these little finger-like projections that stick out from the cells that make up this part of our mucous membranes, the endothelium, the tissue of our mucous membranes. We talked about how those will beat in a synchronized way to sweep the mucus up our respiratory tract towards our throat. We swallow that down and dump the mucus into our digestive system, where the hydrochloric acid and the digestive enzymes in our digestive tract will take care of any of the gunk that's in there. And then we have some cells that if we get sort of past the first line of defense, is like to put up the wall, the skin and the mucous membranes. And if we get past the first line of defense, there are other non-specific or innate defenses that are ready to protect us if a pathogen gets past our skin or mucous membranes. And so we have lots of different types of white blood cells that are able to do phagocytosis. Remember, phagocytosis is the cell-eating process. It's when a cell engulfs a particle outside of it, takes it in, and digests it. So we have lots of different types of white blood cells that are capable of doing phagocytosis, and these cells are the sort of the constant protection that we have in our body if we have a pathogen that gets past the skin or mucous membrane. And so all throughout our body where we have mucous membranes and there's a possibility of a pathogen getting through, there will be these phagocytic white blood cells just sort of cruising around, just doing the sort of walking the beat, doing their patrol. And if they come onto a cell that is not recognized as self, then they will basically check ID. And if you aren't supposed to be there, they're going to eat you. It's like eat first, ask questions later. And so when a white blood cell does that, like we talked about at the beginning of the year, those vesicles that are created when endocytosis or phagocytosis happens, now the bad guy, the pathogen, is inside of a vesicle inside the cell, and the cell will fuse that phagocytic vesicle with a lysosome that contains a bunch of digestive enzymes, and the bad guy gets digested. So last slide is just an overview of the lymph system, and I'm pointing this out because this system is connected to our circulatory system, and the lymphatic system moves body fluids all around the body. So it's another way, apart from the blood, that our white blood cells and our immune system can get things around the body to where they are needed to fight off an infection. And in particular, importance for our immune functioning are lymph nodes, these little nodules that occur every so often around the lymphatic system. And these are places where white blood cells tend to congregate and basically kind of sort of exchange notes, like, what have you been seeing recently? What kinds of pathogens have you been seeing? And this helps other parts of our immune system, the more specific parts that we're going to talk about next time. That's it for now. Thanks for listening. Bring your questions, bring your thoughts, and we'll talk about them next time. Bye.